The identity is what needs to be questioned. Anytime there's an identity, anytime you have a foothold on something that you think gives you some sense of who you are, that is what needs to be questioned. Because freedom just lies on the other side of that. Hey, my friend. I came across a quote from Paramahansa Yogananda the other day, that yoga fellow you might be familiar with. I'm not very familiar with him, but I think I pronounced his name right. But he said he said death is only an experience through which you are meant to learn a great lesson. You cannot die. And there's another aspect to that I'd like to add, which is through dying, you also realize that you were never born, which is why it's such an opportunity while you're still in this body to come to a realization of what you actually are, where you actually came from, what you're actually made of or not made of. And you hear a lot of spiritual folks talking about how we're here to learn lessons and that's life is a big school and you're here to grow and all of that. Um, but ultimately, if you want to go that route and look at things that way, I would say that the only thing you're really here to learn is that you can't die, that all fear is an illusion. And so if you believe you're something that can perish, that can cease to exist, then you need to be shown that that's not true over and over and over again until it finally sinks in. Uh, and of course, your definition of who you are, who you think you are, this thing that could die changes. And so you have to experience that in as many ways as necessary until you realize that that is not the truth of you and you cannot die. But essentially, the only thing that's worth learning here on the planet is that all fear is the fear of death. Ultimately, all concerns you have, even the most basic fundamental concerns, if you're a parent, fear of your children's safety, if you're a single person, then fear of not having a job or um, not being liked in the eyes of the world or society or your parents, or your friends, whatever. But it's all fear of ceasing to exist. And of course, the real crux of the matter is that you never existed in the first place. That you were always this awareness, taking all of this in, momentarily identified as being something in particular, a body in this instance. But you never were anything in the first place. And so to realize that while you're in this very real, seemingly real play of being something in particular, is a great, great gift, a great opportunity, which is why it's so important to question anytime you feel you know who you are, Because anytime you know who you are, you're an identity. And all identities eventually come to an end. They have to, because they began. They begin for all kinds of reasons. In a lot of cases, it's trauma. You know, the personality often forms around trauma. But for whatever the reason, the identity is what needs to be questioned. Anytime there's an identity, anytime you have a foothold on something that you think gives you some sense of who you are, that is what needs to be questioned. Because freedom just lies on the other side of that. Freedom is being nothing, is not existing, is returning to the truth where you don't exist, where there's just awareness. Awareness doesn't exist, it's not a thing. Only things can exist. So you don't have to wait until the body starts shutting down and starts getting ready to end its term on the planet. Your ability to inquire, your apparent ability to inquire, is available to you right now. You know, you look behind me, you see all these cars whizzing by. You know, it's a good example of how we human beings zoom around thinking we know where we're going, what we're up to, and we have a sense of reality. When really everybody is clueless, we've just come to some conclusion about the way things are, that life should operate this way. But if you can get to a place in yourself where you become very honest and you acknowledge that you don't really ever know what the hell's going on, you know, then you can kind of recognize that this is a dream. You're in the midst of a dream. And when you recognize that you're in the midst of a dream and that you are a character in this dream, then you don't have to take things so seriously. There's not even anything you really have to learn anymore. Because when you realize this is all a dream, even you are a dream, you are being dreamed, then you've died. Because you've realized that you're none of it. You haven't really realized what you are, other than that you're not any of it. You're connected to it. It's not separate from you. But at the same time, it doesn't define you. And you no longer have a definition. And when you don't have a definition anymore for yourself, you don't exist. So the only thing you're here to learn is that all fear is the fear of death. And that death is an illusion. And to come to a full realization of that, you need to question who you think you are. You need to question any identity that's currently in place. You could say that home is waiting for you, waiting for your return. Your return to non-existence. It's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it's everything you've always wanted.